In 1986, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant disaster occurred. Due to censorship and secrecy, the evacuation only began 36 hours later. More than 30 years have passed, and it seems that everything is more transparent and straightforward now, but that's not the case. On August 8th, an explosion occurred at a testing site in the Arkhangelsk region. The local administration issued a statement about a brief spike in radiation and then deleted it. Only 2 days later, did the Rosatom Corporation confirm that the explosion had occurred at a facility with a radiation source and that 5 people have died. Again, the situation is not explained to ordinary people, which creates panic. Let's leave this to the conscience of contemporaries. Our concern now is history. The whole situation around Severodvinsk is further proof that history teaches people nothing. After all, radiation disasters of various scales have occurred before, both at military and non-military sites. Very few known about them, and right now we'll try to correct that situation. But first we'll explain that the sudden need for nuclear weapons in general and nuclear submarines in particular arose for the USSR due to constant defeats on the international stage. The US surrounded the country with military bases, and the Soviets decided to build a submarine capable of moving undetected anywhere and keeping America in constant fear. The pioneers of this movement were the Project 675 submarines, known in NATO as Echo 2. One of them was the K-431, a nuclear-powered vessel 115 meters long. It was built in less than a year, in 1965, and for 20 years they only replaced missiles and refueled its 2 reactors. In the late 1980s, there was talk of decommissioning it, but the submarine, which had traveled 180,000 miles, was kept, and in 1985 it was once again refueled in Chajma Bay, as often happened with violations of all possible safety standards. Due to the outdated technology, the reactor lid needed to be lifted for refueling, but not too high, as the submarine could become unbalanced. To prevent the issue, a beam was placed on the lid. Due to the USSR's particular policies, the details are still shrouded in secrecy. However, the most common version is that a passing torpedo boat created a wave that knocked the beam off. The reactor lid shot skyward, the submarine tilted, and an uncontrolled chain reaction began in the reactor. Simply put, the nuclear reactor turned on while open, triggering a terrifying explosion. 8 officers and 2 soldiers were killed instantly. To understand the explosion's power, the 12-ton reactor lid was thrown 100 meters away. As later determined from the gold ring of one of the officers, the radiation level at the epicenter was close to 100,000 rengens per hour, while the radiation level on the lid of the Chernobyl Unit 3 was only 10. As is often the case, the fire was fought by completely unprepared people, crews from neighboring submarines, harbor workers, and passers-by. They had no special equipment, yet the reactors and the submarine were burning, releasing incredible amounts of radiation into the air. Specialists arrived 3 hours later. Of course, the first thing they did was establish a total information blackout, and the village of Shkodovo 22 was completely cut off from the outside world. Thanks to the efforts of so-called specialists, the exact scale of the destruction remains a mystery to this day. There are reports of a radioactive cloud 3.5 kilometers long and 290 official affected people. However, by the mid-1990s, this number was officially raised to 950. Many of them were diagnosed with acute radiation sickness, but no one bothered to accurately count or establish a connection between the illness and the Chajma incident. To receive a special certificate was required, which not everyone managed to obtain. K-431 was far from the only nuclear troublemaker causing concern for environmentalists. There was also K-278, which sank in the Norwegian Sea due to a fire. According to Norwegian researchers, the radiation level in the waters surrounding the submarine exceeds the norm by 100,000 times. Although the submarine currently poses no danger due to its depth and remoteness, eventually the hull, which serves as a sarcophagus, will deteriorate. What to do in this case is unclear. For decades, scientists have been planning its recovery, and recent reports suggest its extraction might take place using a wonder weapon in the early 2020s. As for the K-27 disaster, it's almost too painful to recall. Chasing after the Americans who successfully tested the Seawolf submarine with a liquid metal nuclear reactor, the USSR built its counterpart. Back in 1959, 2 accidents occurred during tests of the reactor on a test stand for the submarine. Even then, K-27 lost its first crew member due to radiation exposure. But who cared about people? In 1963, despite not having passed proper sea trials, the wonder weapon was put into service, and just a year later, it embarked on a serious mission. Who would have thought that one of the two reactors would fail? The liquid metal solidified, and the sailors literally had to chisel out the lead plug by hand. Almost all of them received extreme doses of radiation, but as was customary in the USSR, the lives and health of ordinary people mattered little. The second voyage in 1965 also proved eventful. The Wright electric motor caught fire. In 1967, the USSR came up with an unprecedented idea – to sail around the globe without surfacing. Even during preparation, the reactor broke down, spilling lead. If not for the horror of the events, the following would sound like a joke. But no, on May 24, 1968, K-27, by then firmly nicknamed Nagasaki, was sent out to sea again. It's said that one of the technicians flatly refused to release the submarine and didn't want to sign the ship's log. But no one listened, and K-27 set sail from the base for the last time. For the last time because a powerful gamma radiation release occurred in the reactor compartment. All 144 sailors received lethal doses of radiation, and their average life expectancy after the incident did not exceed 50 years. 9 sailors died in terrible agony within the first few days. The same crew members, officers, and regular personnel handled the cleanup. And over the next 10 years, there were still attempts to get K-27 back into service. This fact perfectly illustrates the atmosphere that prevailed in Soviet power. Incidentally, the Americans eventually simply shut down a similar program, citing its complexity and unpredictability. The K-27 crew members were discharged from hospitals with the diagnosis of asthenovegetative syndrome because acknowledging the facts of the accident was forbidden. At the time of the K-27 submarine disaster, it was still 18 years until the Chernobyl disaster and 1 year before the K-431 explosion. Later, the USSR would claim that it had not yet encountered the consequences of nuclear disasters and didn't know what to do. But history remembers everything, and if you enjoyed this part of the story, don't forget to like the video, making future videos even more informative.